So a few years back, I released a series of grenade damage testing videos to try and provide the community a solid resource on the subject matter. And since there has been many patches, tweaks, and changes made to the sandbox at large since that point, I think it's time to run them back. This video is obviously focusing on our void grenades, and there are some important testing parameters to highlight before we get into things. This is a PvE video and the focus will be on single target damage. That is not every grenade's strong suit, and while I will touch on the functionality and utility of each grenade, damage is the driving factor here. In this video series, I will be testing in the Grasp of Avarice dungeon versus the Ogre boss. In previous videos, I did test versus Carl and physically tallied up every damage tick. And while I'm still going to do that, it is nice having the wipe screen damage to double check the results. I'm also going to try to get a better read on each grenade's consistency. Any grenade that deals damage over time or creates a lingering damage field, I will test 5 times. Then I can give you the high, the low, and the average of each set. The damage numbers being presented are going to be base damage. Now, I know you could use Echo of Undermining and allow your grenade to apply a 15% void weaken to a target, but just for simplicity's sake, base damage. If you do want to factor that in, take any number in question, multiply it by 1.15. True results might be a shade less than that because it does require 1 damage tick to activate it, but you'll be in the neighborhood. I will be taking into account the Echo of Remnants fragment, which does increase the lingering duration of some of our grenades. And for any warlocks out there, I will be testing the applicable grenades with the Chaos Accelerant aspect. And I hope that covers everything. If you do have any additional questions, leave it down in the comments. Maybe me or one of your fellow guardians can help you out. Starting out, we're going to ease into things with the Suppressor Grenade. Base cooldown, 2 minutes and 1 second. This is an explosive grenade that will suppress enemies. It is on a short fuse, there is about a 1.5 second delay before it explodes, but when it does, it has roughly an 8 meter maximum radius. While not applicable versus bosses or mini-bosses, the suppression effect will render lesser tier enemies non-combative for 10 seconds. For the damage, while it will diminish based on proximity, at max we're looking at just shy of 40,000. Is raw single target damage what this grenade is intended for? No, it is not. It can prove to be a bit more useful versus targets that can actually get suppressed, helping you control the play space a little bit better. If you are using the Echo of Domineering fragment though, just applying the suppression effect to any target will result in a free reload for all of your weapons. So just something to consider. Next up, the Void Spike. Base cooldown, here again, 2 minutes and 1 second. This grenade attaches to hard surfaces and emits a torrent of damaging void light. The lateral reach on this grenade is about 11 meters, and the conical damage field does widen out to approximately 10 meters at that distance. At base, this grenade does have a lingering duration of 4 seconds, but that moves up to 6 if you do have the Echo of Remnants fragment equipped. And I gotta say, this grenade was a nightmare to test in this environment specifically. On the ground, shooting up into a target is not the ideal placement, but in this arena, options are limited. Initially, I didn't think it'd be much of an issue because we do have a big lumbering ogre standing in front of us, but that ogre ain't stupid. It actively tries to exit the damage field every time. So, needless to say, my in-game results were not really indicative of the grenade's full potential. Theoretically, it could deal 71,000 points of damage over its 4-second duration. Best I was able to catch in-game though across 5 throws was 44,440 with an average of 37,000. And while my testing with the Echo of Remnants fragment didn't go a whole lot better, I was a little more fortunate on a few throws. Like this one here, where the grenade got cocked off at a 45 and maybe didn't trigger the ogre's flight response. That one did score almost 85,000 points of damage. But I did end up only averaging 55,000, which I figure is probably half of the grenade's full potential. All in all though, this grenade can output some good damage and is probably more useful in the moment-to-moment gameplay, but you do have to be cognizant of how you're placing it. You want to avoid uneven surfaces, try not to stick it on off-kilter terrain, but a well-placed Void Spike can put the hurt on a pack of enemies. Moving on though, the Magnetic Grenade. In its standard form, it will attach to targets or surfaces and explode twice. Base cooldown, a little quicker here at 1 minute and 45 seconds. And I will say, it does have some pretty aggressive target tracking tied to it. But this is also the first grenade that we've come across that can be charged with the Chaos Accelerant aspect. When doing so, it creates a short-range void blast that most veteran players know as Handheld Supernova, which can reach out to about 15 meters. This does carry a knockback effect, and targets that are struck by it will become volatile. Also noted here is a cooldown reduction. Just having Chaos Accelerant equipped alongside a Magnetic Grenade does reduce it to 1 minute and 30 seconds. As far as the damage is concerned, a stuck grenade is going to deal a consistent 43,752. When charged up with Chaos Accelerant, you will throw out 5 individual projectiles, each one dealing 14,344 for a grand total of 71,720 if all 5 land. In terms of its utility, at base it is a very consistent and very user-friendly grenade that shoots out like an arrow and has one of the quickest cooldowns of the batch. You might find it to be a little light when considering its single target damage though, and really doesn't excel at ad clearing either. The handheld Supernova variant though is pretty stout and equally as consistent when in range. Might be a nice single target damage supplement, and it actually does a pretty good job at close range ad clearing if you choose to make use of it. Sticking with the theme of shorter cooldowns, the Scatter Grenade. Also 1 minute and 45 seconds at base. On impact, this grenade does split into smaller sub-munitions that cover a large area with multiple explosions. The Scatter Grenade is also chargeable with the Chaos Accelerant aspect that activates tracking onto projectiles, which, in theory, should up its consistency. In the past, the overall benefit of this was questionable, but I know at some point Bungie did make an effort to improve upon this, so we'll see how things go. When using the grenade in its base form, my best grenade scored a shade over 48k, and my worst one was around 31.5. Average of the 5 grenades though did work out to 42,788, which I thought was pretty good. With a charge grenade though, and whoops, that grenade just phased right through our target, I guess watch out for that. This one did make contact though, and it ended up being my best result at just under 49,000. The worst was 33k, but I actually averaged a bit less than I did with the standard grenade at 41,570. So I'm going to arrive at the same conclusion that I did in the past and say you really don't need tracking on these scatter grenades to maximize its consistency or its damage versus a single target. Even for ad clearing though, which is probably more in line with this grenade's intended role, I never really saw a huge benefit from the tracking. If your grenade's a bit off target or the enemies are a little more spread out, yeah, it could help in that scenario. But I think for all intents and purposes, charged or uncharged, the grenade's going to accomplish basically the same thing. Single target damage isn't great, but it's not terrible either, but it does pack enough of a punch to clear out packs of ads in most cases. The damage gets applied quickly, it does blanket a pretty good area, and it is on a faster cooldown. Not a terrible general use grenade. Onto the Void Wall now. On ground contact, it creates a horizontal wall of burning void light. Base cooldown 201. This was, and still is, the Void Grenade with the highest potential damage, but it has proven time and time again to be less than user-friendly and pretty inconsistent versus non-stationary targets. The Void Wall is going to spill out perpendicular to the angle of approach. It's about 20 meters long, 3 meters high, but only like 1 meter wide. The total duration of the grenade is about 4.5 seconds from impact, 6.5 if you do have Echo of Remnants equipped to extend that out. You do get a little blast damage as the wall fans, and then damage ticks roll off at 5 per second. And while I did brace myself for this test to be an absolute mess, things did play out better than I expected. With a base grenade, I did hit a high of 108,868, which should be reflective of max damage. The low was 40,000 less than that, but I did hit an average of 97,000 over the course of 5 grenades. With Echo of Remnants equipped, the highest total was just short of 154,000. Here again, I think that's just about the best that this grenade is gonna do. The low grenade of that set was pretty bad, not even hitting 55,000, but here again, a pretty good average of 116,368, which, I mean, just in terms of raw damage, blows every other grenade that we've looked at thus far clean out of the water. So yeah, this grenade can hit some numbers, but it does have its drawbacks. It is completely ground confined. It can bounce off an object or an enemy and get thrown off course. You need to have yourself oriented correctly when you throw it, and the grenade is not going to see nearly as much damage versus a highly mobile target. But it does work quite well versus big, slow-moving, or stationary enemies. Also, it's got plenty of damage to evaporate packs of ads if you get it positioned properly. And this is a grenade that's kind of contingent on those ifs. The potential is there, but you gotta be willing to take the good with the bad when you equip this grenade. Alright, 2 more to go. Next up, the Axion Bolt. On impact, this grenade forks out and spawns Void Seeker orbs. The amount of orbs that it creates is based on the number of enemies in the proximity. At base, the maximum is 2, but the enemies must be within 12 meters of the point of impact. If charged with Chaos Accelerant, that radius is pushed out to 17 meters, and it can now spawn up to 4 that do track a bit more aggressively. Once spawned, these Seekers will track targets for up to 10 seconds, and while Echo of Remnants should extend the uptime, I couldn't get a good read on the improvement. My apologies. In terms of single target damage though, this will be the worst grenade. If there's only one target in the area, you only spawn one Seeker, and that Seeker's damage is 26,703. If you are charging this grenade with Chaos Accelerant and using it for ad clearing, it does do a better job than I think most people would expect, but still, and I think most would agree, it's really just not a fantastic grenade for the PvE side of the game. With that, moving on to the last, and probably what is the community's favorite, the Vortex Grenade. Creates a vortex, pulls targets inward, and continually damages those trapped inside. Base cooldown like the Axion Bolt, the longer 2 minutes and 32 seconds. And unlike the others, I do have to test this grenade under 4 different conditions, so we're going to take it one step at a time. At base, the grenade's damage field has a 4 meter working radius, but the pull from the grenade stretches out about 3 meters more, out to 7 meters. Keep in mind though, bosses, mini-bosses, they're not going to get pulled from this grenade. Total uptime of the grenade from impact is 4.5 seconds, and once the damage field is established, those damage ticks will roll off at 4 per second. The best grenade under these conditions saw the Ogre stand in the damage field for the entire duration, and it dealt about 56,000 points of damage. On the worst one, the Ogre made a pretty quick exit, but I did average 46,372. Next, I'm going to be adding on just the Echo of Remnants fragment, which extends the total duration up to 6.5 seconds. With the extended duration, the best grenade netted almost 80k, and once again, that should be a good read on how much damage this grenade can potentially deal. The bad grenade of the batch still netted about 42, with 60,981 being the average of the 5. Next, I'm going to be taking off the fragment and just looking at what the grenade can accomplish with Chaos Accelerant. The overall radius of the damage field will increase from 4 meters to 5 meters, and it adds 1 second to the base duration, so we're looking at 5.5. And when running my consistency test here, I did land almost 5 perfect grenades. The high was just over 69,000, the low was just under 69,000, and the average was 69,000. Did I just get lucky with every single grenade? I will say I wasn't unlucky, but I'm sure increasing the size of that damage field did play a role as well. And last condition, Echo of Remnants and Chaos Accelerant working together. You're still going to get that 5 meter radius on the damage field, but now the total uptime of the grenade is improved to 7.5 seconds. The best, and what was a max damage grenade, scored 99,579. The low wasn't all that low at 77k, and the average across the 5 was 86,598. So while the damage from the base grenade isn't overly impressive, if you have anything boosting it up, those numbers are pretty good. And while it might not hit the highs that the Void Wall does, it's not hard to see why this is many players' preferred grenade in this kit. That respectable damage is paired up with some pretty solid overall usability. You can smack enemies with it directly, you can plop it on objects, you can tag enemies in the air. The radius of the damage field is pretty forgiving, and even if you miss your mark, you might be able to pull some enemies into it. And while I do think there are times, places, setups, or situations that some of the other grenades could excel in, I do think that the Vortex Grenade is probably the most well-rounded and versatile of the bunch. But hey, I'm not here to tell you what to use, just to provide information that lets you make an informed decision for yourself. But with that, Guardians, I got a lot more grenades to go retest. Have a great day. I'll catch you on the next one.